Welcome to Professor Game Podcast, where we interview successful practitioners of games, gamification, and game thinking who brings the best of their experiences to get ideas, insights, and inspiration that help us in the process of getting the students to learn what we teach. And I'm Rob Alvarez. I teach and work at IE Business School in Madrid, where we create interactive and engaging learning materials. Want to know more? Go to professorgame.com/subscribe, start on our email list, and ask me anything. Engagers, welcome back to another episode of the Professor Game Podcast. And we have a special interview today. And why is it special? Because today I am not with one guest, but two fantastic guests that we have today, Laura and Carmela. Carmela, Laura, are you prepared to engage?
Yes,
we are.
Let's do this. Let's go, because we have today with us Laura Marie Edinger-Schons, who is a professor of sustainable business at the University of Mannheim. In her research, she focuses on the question of how organizations, profit and nonprofit, can contribute to sustainable development as defined by the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. Specific topics which she is interested in include employee engagement and sustainability, social Entre and Intrapreneurship, digital social innovation, corporate democracy, and new work. She has been published in renowned academic journals, including Academic Journal of Marketing, Journal of Consumer Psychology, Journal of Academy of Marketing Science, and Journal of Business Ethics. And of course, she has received a lot of awards. You can see a lot of the things that she's done. She was voted top 40 under 40 in the magazine Capital. Many things. You can see that in the intro that we have on our professorgame.com page. But we also have today with us definitely Carmela. Carmela Aprea is a professor also at the University of Mannheim and holds the chair of economic and business education, instructional systems design, and evaluation. She's also the co-founder and director of the Mannheim Institute for the Financial Education. And previously, she was a professor of economic and business education at the Friedrich, Schiller University, Jena, and professor of vocational training research at the Swiss Federal Institute for Vocational Education and Training in Lugano. She has also been a visiting professor at the University of Innsbruck. She has taught and researched at the University of Twente, University of Graz, Università degli Studi Roma Tre. I'm guessing that's kind of my Italian pronunciation as well. Università di Roma La Sapienza, Università Cattolica del Sacro, Cuore, Milano, and Stockholm University, and the Ben-Gurion University at the Negev. So her interests include many things: game-based learning, one of them, assessments, financial literacy, pension planning, financial and sustainability education, mental representation of economic concepts, visual learning, resilience in work, and educational context. And she does many, many more things, which again, you can find in the intro. Is there anything, Laura, Carmela, that I missed from your intro that you want to make sure that is in before the interview?
No, totally fine. Thank you.
Yeah, perfect. Thank you.
Fantastic. So we are here today because we're going to talk about a project that you had at Mannheim. But before that, I'd like to know, that the audience would like to know, let's start with Laura. Laura, what does a typical day for you look like? What are the things that you're doing in a day like today?
So I think the days since Corona, since the lockdowns, are a little bit different than before. So before, I would typically go to the office in Mannheim and then spend the day there and maybe have a coffee or a lunch with my team. Since the lockdown, the days are very different. I have two kids. One is 3 years old, and one is 3 months old. And they are both at home, so we usually have our parents with us to take care of the kids while we are working. And the mornings are, getting the kids ready, then spending the day in front of Zoom trying to teach. In the meantime, helping the 3-year-old to go to the toilet or breastfeeding the 3-month-old baby. And then working night shifts usually to get things done that we don't get done during the day. So at the moment, I would say a typical day, there is no typical day.
All full of excitement and good things, it seems.
Yeah.
How about you, Carmela? What does a day look like nowadays?
Well, I very much agree with Laura that the days have changed since Corona. And I have the impression that from an inside perspective, many, many things happen on a normal day. You get connected with many people from many countries via Zoom, something that you never would have imagined before in this intensity. But at the same time, you are in your home office the whole day. So in your environment, nothing changes particularly, but you have a very much exciting interactions during the day. And this is something that I find interesting. One of the good things in this Corona crisis, which actually are not so many good things, but I think this is one of the positive sides, that you get connected via media like video-based media that are so helpful in these days. So the days are very busy with talking to the team, talking to other people, writing up papers, and having a lot of Zoom meetings, of course. So I think this will be something very particular to remember from the Corona time.
We will not forget our Zoom times, and definitely we will not, sort of fall back to only having face-to-face. We will not only have Zoom meetings in the future, I hope, but we will have a very healthy mix. I think there's many things that we have learned, and there's what people like to call the design affordances. So what are the new affordances that we have thanks to all these new mediums? And that's something very exciting as well in these days. But Carmela, Laura, there is a very exciting project, which is what brought our attention and brought us together to have this conversation today. And I want you to explain to the audience, what was the project about? What were some of the results maybe, and how did it work?
Carmela, do you want to go ahead?
Yes, I can do it. So I think the idea was born because I did some gaming and game studies within the field of financial literacy, and also have a PhD student who did a course in the course of Laura's course for PhD students. And I think this was the way how, Laura, we got connected in this sustainability games. And then you came up with the idea to do a course together. And so we sit together and thought a little bit what we could do, and we came up with the sustainability games. And the idea of sustainability games is that it's twofold gaming process, because students had the task to develop their own sustainability game according to the sustainability development goals. And after this idea was born, we set up a seminar, and maybe Laura, you can tell a little bit about our seminar.
Yeah. So I think that since I'm teaching in Mannheim, I always try to think about ways how you can engage students. So you're not, because in the sustainability field, it's especially the case that we don't have a lot of textbook knowledge, right? So this is a field that is very fastly developing, and the best way to learn is really by trying to understand it yourself, right? And thinking about it, reflecting about it. So in many of our courses, we let students, for example, develop their own social enterprise ideas and so on. And with Carmela, we just sat together and we said, okay, how can we bring these topics together as sustainability and education? And we thought, why not engage the students and let them develop games instead of, us developing a game and letting the students play the game to learn? We thought that the game development process could be a way for the students to reflect about sustainability. And we let them choose a topic from the sustainability field. And this can be, if you know the Sustainable Development Goals of the United Nations, can be very different topics, from climate change to, for example, poverty reduction or education. It can be various different topics. And the students were allowed to choose one of those topics and to think about a game mechanism that you can use to create a game solution, which then can be used for other people to learn about these topics. And we had super interesting ideas. So some students actually developed classical board games. Some others did something like, you remember maybe Jenga, this tower. And they had the SDGs, the Sustainable Development Goals, as these bricks, and you could pull out one brick and then answer a question. So we had various different ideas. And while designing the game, the students learned about the topic itself, because of course they had to, for example, when they created questions, they had to find out about the, background information that is necessary to create the game. So that was our approach to, trying to engage students to learn about sustainability.
Very exciting. And it's sort of a meta learning, right? So you're abstracting yourself from what other person has to learn, and you're learning how to get them to learn. And of course, you're learning in the process. Very, very exciting. And I had a question within those lines, like, How did that look like? Like, what would be? Can you guide us very quickly through what was the sort of the process that the students went through? They had a class on sustainability, or they read a book, or I don't know. What did that look like? What was the process that these students went through?
Maybe the thing that also was common between Laura and me was our engagement for design processes, and that was the idea that guided our seminar as well. It was along the design process and the different phases of design thinking, as for example, to analyze the field, then to test solutions for the field, but also to get feedback and to have all the social sides from design processes and to work as a team together. So this was something that was very important for us as well, because students did not only learn how to immerse themselves into the content and to come up with a game mechanism, but also how to work as a team. And this was equally important. So actually, they got a little input about the sustainability goals, of course, because they should have been able to decide with their group which goal they wanted to choose for the game. But then we also introduced them to design thinking, and of course also to some basics of game design. But it was really very much just in time, and it was really like an impulse, like a stimulation. But they were very happy based on that, and kind of immersed themselves in this process and tried to get the knowledge that they needed via the internet, or they came to us and asked for additional literature also.
Interesting. So basically, they were having some information on the topics themselves. They were having some information on game design and design thinking in general as well. And from that, it was mostly sort of them taking the lead in a way, right?
Yeah, it was very minimalist from our side. But we were there, of course, to give them feedback and to guide them if they had some problems.
Of course, that makes a lot of sense. Sounds very, very interesting. Sounds like something many people would like to participate in. And was it sort of I'm guessing it was not a mandatory subject. It was something that was optional. Who was able to participate there?
So basically all our master students were able to participate, and we had actually a lot of applications. Carmela, correct me. I don't know. Was it like 60 or 70 applications for 24 slots? So there was quite some competition going on, and we had even some students who showed up without having, an official registration for the class, trying to get in. And we had to send them, back, because we said, okay, at the beginning we have to pilot this new teaching format with this group and see how it works. And I think, as Carmela said, all went very smoothly. So after this kickoff, we basically just let them really start. On the first day, they actually started to pick a topic, discuss the topic, find some information, think about possible game mechanisms that they would be interested in. And maybe one addition to what Carmela said, one thing we created for them was something that is often used in business modeling. So maybe this business model canvas, which is like a poster where you describe a business model, right?
And there is a gamification model canvas, if you don't know.
Okay.
It was created, in case you're interested in that, it was created by a Spanish professor, but search for gamification model canvas. And I think Sergio Jimenez is involved in that. So that's going to show up, and they put it up for free. Anybody can use it.
Oh, that's good.
So
good to know.
Yeah, what we actually did is we designed our own. It was called Game Design Canvas.
Interesting.
And we gave that as a resource for the students to use, and they could fill in, the blanks. So on the top left we had the sustainability problem. On the right top side we have the game mechanism, the game description. Then we had on the bottom the target groups that they are intending, to design this game for. And then on the bottom right, we had the learning goals. And I think that was a nice structure for the students to, work through the seminar and always fill in more of their ideas and content. But basically, they really started from the first session on to create their own ideas and to test them again and again, to present them to the group, get feedback, present them to us. And we could, give them some hints and ideas. And it was really this iterative process in which they, tested this fail fast, learn fast method, basically, right? Testing something, seeing whether it works or not, and then moving on.
So it was, in a way, without the technological part, it was kind of a hackathon for the sustainable goals and doing it through games. So a game-a-thon or something like that.
Yeah.
Sounds good. So then the next question that I typically have, and of course, we're assuming that this is a type of situation that you would repeat, or it's something that you would do and maybe for a different thing. Like, what was the process for you to come up with a seminar like this one? Like, if you were to do it again, or if I said, come over to IE, we want to do this as well. But of course, with our different needs, our students are a little bit different. Maybe here it's not sustainability development goals, but it's something, similar. Like, would you have a process to go about this? Like, how would you manage if you want to replicate this in the future? And of course, a few words. I know this has a lot more thought behind it.
I think what I would repeat would be, as Laura said, an important element was this game design canvas, because it gave structure to the learning process of the students and also to the team process. I think this was something very important to give them some structure in this obviously very messy design process, which is sometimes overwhelming for beginners like students are. But I think this gave them enough structure to be very creative. And I think this is something independently of the content, and maybe independently also of whether it's a game-based. For example, in the last semester, we worked with video-based learning, and students had to create a video on the impact of Corona to the economy. And it was the same thing. They needed some kind of structure, and this would be something that I would transfer to another environment to implement, of course.
If that's okay, can you tell us what are the elements of that canvas?
Yeah, so on the canvas, we had the first box, the sustainability problem. So what is the topic that they would like to look at? Let's say we had, for example, one group, they created an escape room box. So like a box full of things you can use to, play it as an escape room at home. And the game was called Escape from Poverty. And they looked at SDG 1, reducing or eliminating poverty, right? That's the sustainability goal. And to design the game, they, of course, had to understand this problem really in depth, right? So, for example, they looked at theories around how is poverty actually measured, what are indicators of poverty. They looked at, there is in Oxford, for example, an initiative which tries to conceptualize poverty as a multidimensional construct and not just, having a bottom line, poverty line. If you fall below that, then you're poor. So they really had to understand the complexity of this problem. Second box, the game description. So which game mechanism would they like to use? In this case, it would be this escape game, right? And then they had to describe the mechanism and why is this mechanism especially useful to, let people learn about this problem. Then on the bottom of the canvas, we had the target group. So which people is this game aimed at? Is it like for smaller kids, or is it for youngsters or for adults? And why is this game mechanism and this, topic especially good for this target group? And then we had the learning goals on the bottom. And the learning goals, of course, they were asked to reflect about those right from the start, because, of course, you should know which impact you want to have with this game solution, right? And then you design it in a way to reach that goal. And I think that this canvas, Carmela, I think it was really helpful for the students. We got quite some good feedback about it, right?
Yeah.
Sounds very good. In fact, if you have some way of sharing it, we would be happy to put it up in the show notes page.
Yeah, definitely.
Sounds good. Just a quick break before we continue with this episode. If you've been enjoying this podcast, I would really appreciate if you share it with your friends and family and on social media. On Twitter and Instagram, it's @RobAlvarezB and the hashtag ProfessorGame, all one word. And in Facebook, you can find the Professor Game page. Thanks in advance for your engagement. So Laura, Carmela, now we've discussed in depth as much as we can, of course, in a podcast. I'm sure there's many more things we could go through. We could sit down and spend a whole afternoon just talking about this. We've discussed, how this initiative worked. Lots of lessons, lots of interesting things that came through. And I want to ask you, after this experience that you have with this, and I know both of you had in different capacities also experience with, game design, using games in education and so on, would you say that there is some, I don't want to say silver bullet, but some sort of best practice, something that when you're using gamification, using games in an educational setting would benefit the people who are using it, something that would be, a good practice?
I think, I don't know, Carmela, what you would say, but if we look back at our seminar and at a lot of the seminars that we have conducted at our chair, I always think that the kind of silver bullet or the magic mechanism is to trust in the creative power of the crowd, of the students, and to kind of flip the teaching mode, right? And not be the teacher who stands in the front, like teaching to the group, but really to engage the group and let them create something. Because my experience is that as soon as you let students create something by themselves, there is this huge, wealth of motivation that sometimes is not really activated if they just listen and consume. And I think that works in all different teaching formats. And this is maybe a switch, that we have to make as the teachers, right? To not try to just, produce slides and teach them to the students, but really activating this crowd motivation, crowd knowledge, and let them create something by themselves.
Wow, super profound. Absolutely. Carmela, is there anything you want to add? Anything else? Maybe another strategy?
I completely agree and would add, as I said before, to give the students also some structure. I think it's also a design process, how to orchestrate the degree of creativity together with the degree of structure. And I think this is something very important, to put the students as our users at the forefront and to engage them, but also to give them the relevant structures. So to allow some kind of guided participation, or as you said before, to give them the affordances to come up with their ideas, but at the same time help them to structure this messy process.
There is something to be said about the messiness of the process and how that helps as well. But giving a certain level of structure helps, people pull through those difficult times, because sometimes there is so much chaos, that people might feel like a little bit lost. And you definitely want to help them. You want to get them to pull through and to go through the full process and benefit from that, definitely.
And maybe just one thought that came up while I was listening to what you said is, when I look back at those game solutions that were created by the students, I think one thing that is always really interesting is that sometimes the simplest ideas are the most fun games to play. And we had a couple of groups that started off with super complex ideas. And, you even though they present this idea to you and you're like, wow. and then we had like one group, Carmela, you probably also remember this turtle game, right? They had this idea of for small kids to just play a game where you throw the dice and then you have a number and then you move forward with your little turtle on a board game, like a really basic game. And then they were, including questions on plastic garbage in the oceans and so on. But in the end, it turned out to be such a well-rounded and nice game and really fun to play. And I think that's a really important thought, that things don't have to be complex to, in the end, be a good game. It can be very, very simple things, but if they are created in an appealing and nice way, that's probably the better solution than something that is overpacked with, content.
Simplicity can beat complexity almost every day of the week, I'd say.
Yeah, definitely.
Whenever we can, of course. Whenever we can, of course. There are situations that are complex, but how do we simplify it for the understanding? Not to simplify the situation itself, but how do we simplify understanding? It's what simulations are about, right? When you simulate, you're simulating reality. You're not simulating all of reality, essentially because you can't, but also because you don't want to. You simulate it to get some lesson, to get some practice in something specific, right? So that simplification is definitely beneficial. And Laura, Carmela, you've heard these questions. You've seen what the sort of the vibe of the podcast is all about. Is there some, maybe a colleague, maybe somebody you've heard about that you would think would be inspiring to you to listen to answering these questions in this podcast in Professor Game? Like, another guest that you would like to suggest? Either of you, we can start by Laura this time if you want.
Yes, I actually have a suggestion. I don't know if it's too much Mannheim, but we have actually one history professor in Mannheim, and I'm a big fan of him. And it's funny because we sometimes even have the same ideas. When I created this escape room in the castle, he, for example, told me, Laura, I wanted to do the escape room in the castle. And it's like we kind of always discuss our ideas a bit. His name is Hiram Kümper. And I think he has already created a couple of game-based solutions for teaching history content. So, for example, he also engages local schools and the pupils design apps learning about the history of Mannheim and so on. So I think that could be a very interesting person to interview.
Sounds very interesting. Carmela, I don't know if you had the same person in mind.
I think it would be a good candidate. I agree with Laura.
Nice. That sounds like a very, very exciting candidate. You'll probably have to send it to me written somewhere because, again, my German is terrible and I have no idea how to write this person's name.
I will.
And in that same sense of recommendations, you have a lot of resources that you seem to have used for your challenge and for many of the things that you do. Is there maybe a book, or of course one book for each of you definitely, that you recommend for the audience? We have an audience of engagers, people who are looking into doing these kinds of things and using game-based solutions for the classroom. Is there any, it could be game-based related, or it could be something completely different, like the business canvas where you took it from. Is there something that you would recommend the audience to read?
I did my PhD on game theory, so I would recommend reading experimental economics papers, not really books. In terms of books, I'm not sure. I just read or started to read a very good book, Rutger Bregman, Utopias for Realists. Maybe that's a recommendation, because thinking about utopias is also something that is very playful, right? And that is also training the creativity. So that might be my recommendation.
Sounds like a very good recommendation. Carmela, is there anything else you want to... Well, of course, if you have a book that you have in mind.
Yeah, professionally speaking, I think I did my PhD on how designers think. And a book that I really, really loved is the book from Herbert Simon, The Science of the Artificial, because I think he's really a brilliant writer in nearly everything. Be it rationality and bounded rationality, or design thinking, or organizational theory, or education, or cognition, or whatever. But at the same time, he's a very brilliant writer. And sometimes I just read in that book, even though I'm doing other stuff now, just because it's fun. And from a more leisure time side, I would say a book that I read during the Christmas holiday was a book by Sarah Blackwell, who wrote about the existentialist philosophers in France, like Sartre and de Beauvoir. And it was very inspiring how much they have also to say to our times. And I did that long time ago during my school period. And I rediscovered those writers and found it very interesting how this author brought together these ideas, because she wrote about the everyday life of these people and connected their theories with their everyday life and with the historical circumstances. And I found that a brilliant way of bringing these ideas to the people.
Sounds brilliant, and especially a good way to be able to see how to communicate these ideas. Sounds like very exciting. Yeah. And I have one of the questions that for many of the guests is one of the most difficult questions, because we enjoy games a lot. And I would like to know, Laura, Carmela, what would be your respective favorite game? Like that one game that you say, well, all-time favorite, or my, when I was young, my favorite one, or now, the one that I like to play more with kids, like whatever you want to go for, but choose one game that you would say, oh, that would be my favorite, or my favorite today, my favorite 20 years ago, whatever that looks like.
I found that very hard because there are so many games that I like. But I had to actually think back to the times as a student, and probably the only computer game that I really played excessively was Age of Mythology. I don't know if you know that game, where you like kind of build little villages and explore the map and so on. And I think if I should choose one, that's probably the one.
Nice. What about you, Carmela?
Well, it sometimes changes, but I think my all-time favorite would definitely be Mahjong, because I like the meditative and contemplative style of Mahjong, and you can do these things in calm and think about what fits together, and it really relaxes my mind. I very much appreciate it.
Nice. I only played the digital versions of that game. I've never played it physically. Sounds like a very, very nice thing to do as well. I think it could be also, as you were saying, very meditative.
Yeah.
Indeed. Contemplative, definitely. Laura, Carmela, it's been an absolute pleasure. I think there's so many, knowledge nuggets, so much, experience that you've brought to the table with what you've done and nice facts and interesting things to say. However, even the best things come to an end. And I would like, before letting you go, of course, I would like to know where we can find out more about your work. Is there any place where we can find out more about the challenge? If there's anything, maybe on the internet, where we can contact you, if that makes sense, on social media or whatnot, before we say it's game over for today.
So maybe one resource that we can definitely share is, as a chair, we have a YouTube channel, and some of the videos from the course are even uploaded there. So the students produce these short videos about the game solutions that they developed. On this YouTube channel, there is also a lot of other stuff from our seminars, guest lectures, and so on. So that might be an interesting resource. And apart from that, getting in contact, email us online, and LinkedIn, social media, it's all possible.
So you'll find the exact names of these two fantastic guests on the show notes on professorgame.com. If you type Laura or Carmela, you will definitely find the link to this episode with these two fantastic guests. Anything else to add, Carmela?
No, I completely agree. Thank you, Rob.
Thanks to you as well. Thank you for investing this time in the engagers in this community that we have here today. However, at least for now and for today, it is time to say that it's game over. Hey, Engagers, thank you for listening to the Professor Game podcast, and it only makes sense with you. So let's go ahead and connect. I can see you on Twitter. You can let me know what you would like as a guest, what I can help you with if you have any questions that you would like to have for future guests, any doubts that come up during the podcast. You can find me very easily. All you have to do is go to professorgame.com/Twitter, and there you'll find my account. There I'm always sharing content on gamification on the podcast, especially around education. And hey, before you click continue, remember to follow using your favorite podcast app so that you can listen to the next episode of Professor Game. See you there.